Okay, what are you saying, people, and welcome back to my channel. Now today we're going to have a weekly forex analysis for you. So on the screen are the 12 pairs we'll be analysing today. But before we get into that, make sure you subscribe to the channel and also leave a like on the video if you're feeling generous. If you haven't already, make sure you follow me on my Instagram. I'll leave the handle there. Posting a lot of different trading setups there, tips and tricks, and just general advice for you to get better at your trading. And also check out my Telegram channel. I'll leave that in the description. Posting a lot of different trading setups there throughout the week, and you don't be missing out on that. So make sure you check all of that out. Links will be in the description. But like I said, another weekly forex analysis for you. So let me stop talking and let's get into the video. First up, we've got Euro USD. Okay, so for Euro USD here on the daily chart this week, we had a nice push to the downside. I did say last week we do expect to see further continuation to the downside for Euro USD coming into 1.19. As you can see, we tapped into that area very nicely there on the daily time frame. But however, now I think I might be changing my bias for USD back to the upside, and this counter trend move to the downside is just a retrace on the higher time frames. So if I go on the weekly here, you can see we've had a really nice push to the upside, retrace, push to the upside, retrace, and I expect push to the upside and just have a simple impulse retrace continuation pattern here on the weekly time frame. You can see we are at currently previous weekly resistance, now to weekly support. So if we do hold this area here from a weekly perspective, we could in fact see a wick to the downside, price trying to break through in the buy end of the week. Price now closes back above that area, so we could get that sort of situation happening next week. But as long as we stay above this area here of support, I do think the bigger move for USD is now back to the highs, and we can start to see a bit of impulsive movement back to the highs for USD, and the overall bullish trend that we have on the weekly and the daily, weekly and the monthly, sorry, just continue to the upside now for USD. So I think we could be seeing continuation to the upside now for next week. We've seen the daily here, we're looking very bearish here. So again, I wouldn't just buy straight in, probably wait for price to find some ground first. Maybe expect further continuation to the downside because of how bearish we are right now. And then when we start to find a bit of solid support, can look for buys and look to take this higher. And you can see we were very overextended to the downside as well. So again, we still need to see a retrace to the upside at least from a daily perspective. So for next week, my bias is to the upside for USD. Can expect to see a little bit more of further continuation to the downside since how bearish we are when we finish the week. So might tap into 1.18500 around this level here, and then see a nice push to the upside. But generally, I think USD is going to see a little bit more retrace, a little bit more bearish movement to the downside, and then expect to see a push back up and potentially come back and test this area here, which is our previous support before crashing back down. So I think I'm going to find a bit of support around here, might see a bit of consolidation, then a push up to around 1.20500. Next, we're going to take a look at USD JPY. Okay, so for USD JPY this week, as you can see on the screen, we actually flew to the upside this week. I did say last week we do expect USD JPY to get to around 107,500 and potentially 108, and as you can see, we've smashed past 107,500 around there and smashed past 108. So price absolutely flew to the upside. I didn't expect price to do that within this week, but as you can see, we've actually gone past it by the end of this week and all the way up to 108,500. So we're very overextended now here on the daily chart. We had a little bit of a mini retrace there of that bearish candle there, push to the downside, giving us that wick there, closed bearish. But from then, very big push to the upside. So we're very overextended here, and we are due some retrace now for USD JPY. On the weekly, we're actually coming back to this weekly trend line, which hasn't been tested since March 2020. So very strong trend line here for USD JPY. As you can see, initial test there, second, third, and now potentially could be having a fourth. And every time we do test this trend line, you can see we have very strong bearish reactions from this trend line. So I think we could see maybe further continuation to the upside, maybe tag that trend line next week. And then from then, I do expect price to drop to the downside now for USD JPY and take a little bit of a breather. Again, I do expect price to at least come back down to around 106,700, which is this previous bearish candle there, because that was our last resistance where we had a bit of a retrace, then continue the upside down the daily. So I do expect to see maybe a little bit of further push to the upside, price use momentum, and then a nice push to the downside to around 106,700, or maybe come a little bit further and test that trend line if I extend it nicely. So it could actually come and test that area around there. So for USD JPY next week, I do expect to see a nice push to the downside, retracing a lot of the bullish momentum that we've seen over the past couple of weeks, but could see price continue to the upside a little bit further first before coming down, so you need to be aware of that for next week. But my bias is to the downside now for USD JPY. And next we've got USD CAD. Okay, so for USD CAD this week, we saw not too much movement here. We did see price fall to the downside, retrace a little bit as expected. I did say we do expect price to now push to the upside if we do hang on to this support here in the market. So you can see a really nice area of support there, support there. We had really nice bullish reactions. This to me was a bit of a false breakout here since we came back up so sharply. So I said last week to expect to see a bit of retracement back into this level around 1.26. And expect a nice continuation to the upside. So you can see we did have that, but it was short-lived here on the 4H. So you can see retrace, push to the upside, but then price came back down. And this price action here, it doesn't build me with a lot of confidence that we can see further continuation to the upside for USD CAD, because you can see how the price action is very, very corrective. When you want to be seeing your continuations, you want to be seeing them with a lot of momentum. So the retrace is very corrective, and then you expect to see a lot of momentum in that direction. But as you can see, it's very corrective, very choppy, a lot of wicks to either side, a lot of bearish and bullish candles all bunched together there. So could actually see another push back into this level. Again, for me, as long as we stay above this level, which is 1.26, I do expect further continuation to the upside for USD CAD. But however, because the price action is very choppy, it looks like we could be rolling over to the downside and possibly actually see a break of 1.26. And at that point, you do expect to see a retrace. And for that point, we do expect price to give us some new lows there, because this was the last support that price held on to before crashing to the downside. So if you break that support again, 1.26, can be expecting price to push lower all the way back to lows, which is around 1.25, around this level around here. And at that point, probably do expect to see a lower low, since again the overall trend on the higher time frames, daily, weekly and monthly, are all still very much to the downside. So at that point, probably expect a lower low, maybe tap all the way into 1.24 down there, which is probably what I'm favoring for next week for USD CAD, because the price action, again, not a lot of confidence in that price action. Although we could see maybe one last push and then start to see the impulse move to the upside. And at that point, you do expect the price to continue a lot further and possibly tap into this daily trend line here. As you can see, initially a test there, second there. So if I just clear the chart for a second, if we do hold this support, again, I probably do expect to see a third test of that trend line, which is around 1.28. But with that price action, looks like we're going to roll over. If you do break through that support, probably expect price to come back to the lows and potentially tap into 1.24 for next week. Up next is Euro GBP. Okay, so for Euro GBP this week, as you can see, not too much happened. We did roll over to the downside here, as you can see in the 4H, well, slowly rolling over to the downside here, and probably could be actually be expecting further continuation to the downside now after looking at this chart from the higher time frames. Again, if I jump to the weekly here in the market, you can see last week I was talking about this area of support here in the market, saying if we can get another close above this, can actually see price go a lot further to the upside and potentially tap back into this area up here, because again, previous support didn't really get a retest of that, just plummeted to the downside and actually broke through this support as well. So was probably expecting to see price close back above this to be just a false breakout and then see a continuation back up, but it actually looks like we're holding underneath this support here in the market, and actually could favor further continuation to the downside for Euro GBP. You can see on the daily chart here, you can see we had a really nice push to the upside, nice engulfing candle there, but we're failing to break above and we slowly just rolled over to the downside. So could actually now see this area act as a really strong resistance and give us further continuation to the downside and just continue that overall very, very bearish trend here of Euro GBP. So for next week for Euro GBP, with the price action here we have here on the daily and then the 4 hourly as well, I'm actually going to be expecting further continuation to the downside next week for Euro GBP. We do have this trend line here, so I think as long as we stay below this trend line, probably expect price to come all the way back to lows, which is around here. around 0.5400, and potentially see price even take out that low and tap into 0.85 and just see an overall continuation of that bearish trend of lower low, lower high, lower low, lower high, because again, this level of support resistance in the market is very, very strong. You can see here gave a really nice push to the upside. So if we are holding below that, it will be acting as strong resistance. And now we can be expecting an equal reaction in the opposite direction to the downside. So it does look like we're holding onto this level from a daily point, a weekly point, and a 4-hourly point of view. So I'm probably going to be expecting to see further continuation to the downside for Euro GBP for next week, back into lows and potentially a lower low, tapping into around 0.85 for next week. Okay, so up next we've got AUD USD. Okay, so for AUD USD this week, as you can see, we had another continuation to the downside. I did say last week we do expect to see a bit of retracement to start off the week for AU, and then see the continuation to the downside, tapping into around 0.76. We didn't actually get to 0.76, we got quite close. We got to around 0.76 to 220, so not too far off that level. We did come into contact with a daily trend line, as you can see here, this initial trend line here. So first, second, and now a third test of that trend line. So if we do hold that trend line, since we are still in a bullish trend here, we can actually be expecting to see another push to the upside to around 0.78 for next week, which is this previous resistance here in the market. As you can see, this is a very strong area of resistance, previous swing high, so pushed the downside there, broke above, came back down, retested, and then continued to the downside. So key level that the market is respecting. If we do get above this level, however, and hold from a daily perspective, so not like a 4-hourly or an hourly close above this level, a daily close above this level and hold, we could actually see price come all the way back up to 0.8, back to highs, and potentially even higher for AUD USD. So need to be aware of that. But for next week, I think we could be seeing a really nice push to the upside for this pair. You can see we also are holding at this support here as well in the market. So really nice support, which kept us in a bit of a range, broke to the downside, false breakout, got back above, and saw a nice push to the upside. So we've got the confluence of that support and this trend line here for AUD USD. So for now, I do expect to see another push to the upside for AUD USD back into 0.78, and could actually see price just consolidate a little bit between that trend line and that resistance. So could see a bit of this action happening for the next few days, and until we see a breakout of either the resistance, where we do expect new highs, or break of the trend line, which we'll probably see a reversal at that point, we can only just expect to see further consolidation between that resistance 0.78 and that trend line there for AU. So I do expect to see another push to the upside for next week, and potentially a breakout. If you do see a breakout, new highs. If we don't, could see price come right back down and test that trend line. But for now, we're holding onto that level, we're holding onto that trend line. So look to see for buying opportunities for next week back into 0.78. Now let's take a look at NZD CAD. Okay, so for NZD CAD this week, we saw price continue to the downside, really nice push to the downside for this pair. I did say last week we do expect to see further continuation to the downside for NZD CAD into this trend line here in the market. So we were trading around this area here. I said we'll probably see a nice move into that trend line. As you can see, we saw that move, actually broke through that trend line. So NZD CAD right now is looking very, very bearish, and potentially could be seeing a bit of a counter trend move to the downside and a bit of a reversal potentially for this pair. We still do have this key level here in the market, so prior resistance over there in the market, prior resistance here, really strong reaction to the downside, then acted as support with that trend line, of course, and gave us a really nice push to the upside into 0.93. So I think we could be seeing a bit of retracement to the down back up again, because of how overextended we are here for NZD CAD. Here you can see very strong 3 bearish candles there to the downside, taking us all the way to 0.9500. So expect to see a bit of retrace. You can see we're also at this support here as well. So if I actually highlight that area, see previous support there, we're back into that level. So expect to see a push to the upside to start the week off for NZD CAD back into this area, and then potentially retest that trend line, retest that key level of resistance, then see another push back to the downside back into 0.9 and potentially even further if we do have a reversal on our hands for this pair. However, if we do get back above this resistance, back above that trend line, so if you see that retrace start to become a little bit impulsive, break above this area here from a daily point of view. So a daily close above this support, above that resistance, sorry, a daily close above that resistance, a daily close above that trend line, and then we hold, could actually see prices continue this trend to the upside, and this is just a whole false breakout of that trend line. So you need to be aware of that. Look at the market two different ways, of a bullish perspective and the bearish perspective, but right now I'm favoring the bears for NZD CAD after that very impulsive push to the downside. Expect to see some retrace. If you do hold at that area, can be looking for selling opportunities and take this down to 0.9. Get above the area, however, could be coming back all the way up to 0.93 and potentially even higher, and just continue those higher highs, higher lows for NZD CAD for next week. But for now, expect to see a bit of retrace into this level, hold, continuation to the downside, don't hold, continuation back up. Next up, we've got GBP NZD. Okay, so for GBP NZD this week, we saw further continuation to the upside. Last week, I did say we do expect GBP NZD to get to around 1.94. Then if we break through that, 1.95 and then 1.96 potentially. As you can see, we did get that retracement, and then I said 1.94, and as you can see, we did hit 1.94 there. Didn't break through it, however, you can see we did fail to break through it, and now we're looking at a little bit bearish here on the hourly time frame. We did not get to 1.95. So if you do break through this resistance next week, expect to see 1.95, but as you can see, we are looking quite bearish now here for GBP NZD. Even on the daily time frame, we got that bearish close there, pushed to the upside, came all the way back down, giving us that shooting star. So price looks like it is failing to create higher highs now in the market and holding at this 1.94 area resistance. So with that in mind, I potentially could see further continuation back down and not to the upside, maybe back down to test that trend line for a fifth test. You can see initially one back there, second, third, fourth. So we could actually be seeing a fifth test of that trend line. A break of that trend line, however, could actually take us all the way back down to lows, because GBP NZD, you can see, is a bearish market here on the higher time frames. We've got lower lows and lower highs in the market, so we are still bearish, and this is a retrace in the market. So could see that retrace continue a little bit further, but it does look like we're finding a bit of resistance now in the market. So again, I don't think we'll see a move to 1.95 for next week, unless we just see engulfing candle just closing back above 1.94, and then we do expect the momentum to continue to the upside. But it is looking like we might see another push to the downside back into that trend line. Then maybe if we hold that trend line, then we can see a push to 1.95, breaking past that resistance, and just see that bullish trend continuing. But for GBP NZD next week, I do think we might see a push to the downside back into that trend line, and then see the continuation back up. Break of that trend line, probably I'm going to change my bias and probably expect to see a continuation all the way back to the downside. Again, first target will be around 1.9, where we've had this big bullish reaction. Then it will be where we tested this the trend line the third time, which is around 1.88500, around this level around here. So break of the trend line, will be targeting 1.9, this level here, and then that level down there. But I am favoring a push to the downside to start the week off with that bearish price action there on the daily, possibly back into that trend line. If we do hold, look to continue that back to new highs. If we don't hold, could actually see continuation to the downside to 1.9, and then maybe to 1.88500 for GBP NZD for next week. Next, we're going to move on to CAD JPY. Okay, so for CAD JPY this week, as you can see, we saw further continuation to the upside. This is the daily time frame. We're around here. I said last week, expect to see a bit of retracement and then potentially a reversal back down again, since we were holding onto this weekly level of resistance here in the market. So if I highlight this area all across here, you can see very, very strong weekly resistance. Test this multiple times, push the downside, again push the downside, back at that level. I was expecting to see a push to the downside, and you can see that weekly candle as well, the previous candle, nice wick to the upside, pulled all the way back down and gave us a doji, bit of indecision. So expected to see the next week bearish and give us some retracement from this level. However, as you can see, price completely ignored that level this week and just flew to the upside, closing very, very strongly above that resistance. So this is either one of two things: either it's price breaking to the upside and giving us a new trend in the market, even in the higher time frames and the monthly as well, or this is just a big false breakout, and we can see next week's candle come all the way back down, close bearish back below that resistance, and then from there we expect to see further continuation to the downside and potentially price come a lot further, since again you can see the strength of the reactions from this level. We do see big movements to the downside, so if it is a false breakout, we can be expecting to see a big reversal for CAD JPY and price come a lot further to the downside. But if it is not a false breakout and price is generally breaking through this area, can be expecting to see price have a bit of a retrace, because again we are a little bit overextended here on the weekly and the daily. So I expect to see a bit of a retrace. Now this will be acting as very strong support, so from then can actually see price come a lot further and maybe tap all the way back into 88, which is this key level of resistance all the way up here, which is kind of our next weekly target. So again, if we are starting to see a continuation of a bullish trend, can actually expect to see CAD JPY all the way at 88 in the next few weeks, couple months. If it is a false breakout, you see next week candle close back below, expect further continuation to the downside. So that's priced there from a weekly point of view. Daily, you can see we are very overextended here, so I do expect to see a bit of retrace now in the market. Again, that's our weekly level. If we do hold, expect further movement to the upside, price taking out that recent high and probably tap into 86, maybe a retrace after that. Or if you do get price come back below, expect to see a retrace of that. You can be looking for shorts around here, potentially give us a bit of a head and shoulders at that point. So if I move that level, you can see there's a resistance. So if you come back below, retest that resistance, give us that head and shoulders, and from there we can see a nice move to the downside there for CAD JPY. So for next week, I do expect to see a bit of retracement. We've got that key level, that key weekly support level around 84,500. So watch out for that level, see how price reacts. If it looks like price is holding, can expect to see more buying opportunities and expect price to come a lot higher. If it doesn't hold and we see price come below it, look for the retest, look for price holding underneath 84,500, and then look for selling opportunities and can take it down a lot further to the downside to potentially 83 or maybe even 82. As you see, a really nice swing to the downside for CAD JPY. But yeah, for next week, expect to see a bit of retracement and just watch out for the price action in around 84,500. If you hold, expect further continuation to the upside. Don't hold, expect to see a nice drop for CAD JPY to the downside. Up next is GBP USD. Okay, so for GBP USD this week, we saw a bit of retracement, then a continuation to the downside. Last week, I did say for GBP USD, expect to see a bit of retracement back up again, since we were very overextended to the downside, and then expect to see further continuation lower for this pair. I said we could actually see price come and test this level here, which is where we had all this consolidation, this resistance. We didn't really see a retest of this area, so I said price could potentially come back to around 1.37500. You can see we did see that move to the downside, but we didn't quite get there. We held at this support around 1.38, didn't quite get there. We could still potentially go and get there at the end of at the start of next week, so Monday, Tuesday, we could fall to the downside, tap into that area, and then probably expect to see another push to the upside after retesting that. If I go to the daily, you can see we're actually testing a really strong trend line here in the market that's keeping the market pushing to the upside. So if I connect these wicks here, you can see we've had initially a test here, second, third, fourth, and now we're having our fifth test. So we're coming to an area of value here on the daily chart for GBPUSD. This whole area will be acting as support. So if you do get that move to the downside, that was explained to you in the 4 hourly, I don't think it will be I think it will be short-lived, and then we could see price reverse quite easily back to the upside, because if you do hold this trend line here from a daily perspective, can actually potentially see price come all the way back to highs, because I still do think GBPUSD from a higher time frame point of view, like the weekly, the monthly, is still on its way to the upside, and this is just a pullback in the market. So don't take this as a reversal. If we do break through this trend line and hold as resistance, then yeah, we could be seeing a bigger push to the downside for GBPUSD. But right now we are holding above it, so we can be expecting to see further continuation to the upside for GBPUSD if you do hold onto this trend line here. And if you do take out this level here on the 4H, if we take out this level here, which is around 1.4, this resistance here, take out that resistance there for GBPUSD, we're coming all the way back to highs for GBPUSD, back to 1.42, and potentially go and test 1.43 after that for GBPUSD. So Probably for next week, I'm expecting to see a little bit further continuation to the downside, maybe tap into that area there. If you do hold into that trend line down the daily, expect to see a nice push to the upside back into this level here. We might see a bit of consolidation, because again, really strong resistance. If you do break through it, however, do expect to see further continuation to the upside for GBPUSD if we do hold at that level back to 1.42 and potentially even higher. So as long as we hold into this trend line here, expect further continuation to the upside. Basically, don't and we hold underneath it, can be seeing a bit of reversal, but for now it looks like price is holding, so I'm favoring a move to the upside for next week for GBPUSD. Again, might see a little bit moving to the downside first, but again, that's just a little bit more retracement before we have that push higher back into 1.4 for next week. And if you clear 1.4 next week, you could see price go a lot higher and tap into 1.42 for GBPUSD. And next we're going to see what's happening with GBP CAD. Okay, so for GBP CAD this week, as you can see, we've had a nice push to the downside. I was favoring price to actually continue back up for GBP CAD, but as you can see, we did not manage to do that. Price gave us some bearish structure there and actually fell to the downside here. So we're looking very, very bearish here for GBP CAD. I think we could actually see price continue a little bit further, tap into 1.74500, 1.74, which is this key level here in the market on the daily time frame. So really nice previous resistance around here. You can see really nice bearish reactions, tested it as support, gave us that nice engulfing candle and then shot to the upside. So it looks like price is coming back to this area, which is around 1.74500, and then from there, if we do hold that area, then I do expect to see further continuation to the upside for GBP CAD, and this is just price retracing a little bit deeper than expected, because we were testing a very key weekly level of resistance. So it looks like we're getting that reaction there from the weekly point of view. So I do expect the reaction to continue a little bit further, tap to 1.74500. If we do hold that area, do expect further continuation to the upside for GBP CAD. However, if we don't and we actually see price break through the area, hold, then probably see a longer push to the downside now for this pair back into around 1.72 actually. So really key support here, and as you can see, price was in a really nice range between that resistance and that support. So if you do break back underneath, price will now be back into that range, wait for that retest, and then actually look to continue that move to the downside back into 0.72. But from the higher time point of view, I'm still biased to the upside as long as we stay above this key level around 1.74500. As long as we stay above that level, my bias is still to the upside long term, and we'll probably see a reversal around here and see price come back to highs. However, if we don't and price just ignores that level, holds underneath it, and then I probably will change my bias, and from then I'll be looking to short GBP CAD into 1.72 for next week. So expect to see further continuation to the downside next week for GBP CAD back into this really key level of support. Then again, just see how the price action is forming here from a 4-hourly point of view, hourly, daily point of view. See what patterns we're getting from a candlestick point of view, see if price is holding. If it is holding, can look to see that reversal, then continue back up again. And if you do hold that area, I do expect price to get back to so if you do hold that area of support there, I do expect price to come and test 1.76, which is this key support here. So last support we had before price broke to the downside. So I expect to see further continuation tapping into this area. Hold 1.76, don't hold and see price break and hold below, then look for 1.72 for GBP CAD for next week. And up next, we're going to take a look at gold. Okay, so with gold here on the daily chart, we saw further continuation to the downside. I said last week, probably expect to see a bit of retracement back up again. As you can see, that retracement was very short-lived here on the 4-hourly chart. So we had a slight push up and then price just fell to the downside there, looking very bearish. So for gold here, we are still looking very bearish, but as you can see, we're very overextended right now here in the market. I think if I connect these low points now, you can see we're almost at that trend line. So could actually see price fall a little bit further. We also got this key level of daily support and resistance here in the market, which is around 1680, sorry, around 1680. So you can see here, very key level of resistance there, big pushes to the downside, key level of support, big push to the upside, eventually got us all the way up to those highs up there. So I do think For gold, we'll probably see a push into this level and then see a really nice reversal potentially if we do hold onto this area. You can see we're almost at that level. We've got the confidence of this trend line with first test there, second, third test, and now we have the confidence of a very strong level around 1680. So for next week, expect a further continuation to come and really test that area, and then from there only looking for buys to take that higher back into this key level of prior daily support, which will now be turned daily resistance. And you can see we didn't really get a retest of that area anyway, so could expect to see a little bit further continuation to the downside, tap into 1680 into that trend line as well, and see a nice push to the upside for gold back into around 1770. So expecting to see a nice push to the upside if we do hold into that area for next week and target that previous daily support, which will now be turned daily resistance. And last but not least, we've got Bitcoin. Okay, so for Bitcoin this week, we didn't see too much happen in terms of direction, a lot of sideways movement. If I jump to the 4 hourly, actually, you can see we have a lot of sideways movement here in the market. So let's clear the chart for a second. So again, a lot of sideways movement. I did say last week, if we can clear this level here, which is around 52,000, this key level resistance, we're able to see price probably come all the way back to highs and potentially tap into 60,000, which is this level just above the highs around here. So I still think Bitcoin can come and test that 60,000 level, but we do need to take out this 51,000/52,000 area of resistance and then hold it as support. And then from there, we can actually expect Bitcoin to come all the way back to those highs. However, as you can see right now, we just have further sideways movement now for Bitcoin. So we are stuck between this area here of support and resistance. A break of this support will probably take us all the way back down to 58. Will actually take us all the way back down to 38,000, sorry. So around this level here, so really nice area of support. See really nice injection to the upside, breaking through that level. So if you do break through this support and we see a breakout to the downside, expect to see a move back into 38,000 potentially, but a break to the upside will probably take us to 60,000. So for now, Bitcoin can just range what it wants to and just wait for that breakout to give us that confirmation, that confidence of where price could actually go, rather than trading in the range where a lot of indecision is likely to occur. So if we do see a break to the upside, do expect to see 60,000 reached or back to highs at least. However, if we don't break to the upside, we actually break to the downside, Bitcoin could actually come all the way back to around 38,000, potentially even further for next week. Okay, so that is the end of the video. Thank you for watching. Hope you all enjoyed it and found it useful. If you have any questions, want me to explain something in more detail, agree or disagree with my analysis, just drop it down in the comments. I'll make sure I'll get back to you. But thanks again for watching, and until the next one, I will see you guys later.